Somewhere beyond the recesses of time and space, two podcasters are set adrift in a machine, picking up transmissions of movies that are forgotten but not gone.
Welcome to Movie Memory Machine, the only podcast about forgotten movies that is likely to catch a crab while trying to feather a skull, then have a coxswain call a power 10 to drive the bow ball over the finish line. I am your host, Landen Solano, joined always by my co-host, Truman Caps. Truman.
I'm here for you, buddy.
Truman, it's good to see you.
Landon, it's good to be seen. Hearing you list a bunch of different crew rowing terms really makes me reflect on the theory that did they just invent all these terms to fuck with us? Like, is the whole sport a psyop?
You can trust no one.
This whole time, Al Pacino was actually working for a bunch of preppy British dipshits who wanted to make their boats go fast in the 1700s. You gotta call him a coxswain!
I feel that way about plumbing terms a lot. I was trying to help my parents with, or my mom specifically, with a toilet issue.
Oh.
Many
interpretations, Landon.
The second I came out of my mouth. And I was telling her, I think you need a new ball cock. She did not trust that I was speaking truth to her. But then she looked it up. She's like, okay.
She thought, maybe Landon is doing some very blue alt comedy bits on me. That's the way that my son always does. He does have that dirty and ribald podcast, after all.
All right, Truman.
Guys, it's like Landon looks like he's about to get audited by the IRS. He looks like every creative director who has ever called me into their office, had me close the door, and then laid me off.
I usually have a pretty pithy question to ask you to start these episodes, but today I need to start with an acknowledgement more than anything.
Is this a land acknowledgement? Is this a boat acknowledgement?
Well, let me make the acknowledgement, and you can make that determination for yourself. I am not a historian.
Oh.
I am not a sportsman.
Okay.
I am not an expert on race, on poverty, or oppression.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I am a lifelong devotee to film, and I am dedicated to the art of storytelling. So I just need to be real honest about where I'm coming to today's film. I've been struggling with this since I watched the movie and read the book and watched all of the research material for this film. There's not going to be a way for me to fully explain my problems that are so deeply rooted with this film.
There's not going to be a way for me to explain my problems. Cut it right there. That's our entire show.
There's knowing I'm going into an episode already knowing that I'm not going to be able to articulate my issues. Like, it adds a layer of frustration to this. Like, I know I'm going to sound incoherent, babbly, wandery, and just unnecessarily vitriolic. But I believe to the core of me, the problems I'm going to bring up in this episode are justified and valid. And I will go to my grave believing those things, even if I can't fully express them in a satisfying way.
Thank you for speaking your truth. Thank you for sharing that with us. You know what? Not a land acknowledgement, a Landon acknowledgement.
Thank you. I'm going to take a bow ball.
Can't believe it took me that long to get to that bit of wordplay. I, too, was rather put off by this here film that we're about to spend a lot of time talking about. And I want to, I think, maybe just start us out by trying to unpack a little bit of why that is. But I also do want to say it is hilarious, and it says a lot about how completely pickled our minds are by movies and by being the dorky kid at your high school who wanted to talk about movies all the time, that The Boys in the Boat, the, like, most innocuous seeming, the most inoffensive, go see it with your grandma on Jesus's birthday when it debuted movie, like the most soft focus film that you could possibly imagine, has made us this upset.
Yeah, so I've already expressed myself in the abstract. Let me be very explicit with this. I hate this movie more than I hate Reminiscence.
Whoa, dog, whoa, easy. Okay, now
I would rather rewatch Reminiscence twice than watch this one more time.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute since we've watched Reminiscence. I
understand.
Really, this is I would say my second least favorite. I mean, I don't know. Loser is in a category all of its own because that's morally offensive. So here's the thing. Yeah. I think that the problem, and every problem that we have, and the reason that we're going to be going the way that we are on The Boys in the Boat 2023 D period George Clooney, is that you and I really don't like it when movies try to make you feel emotions that they have not earned, and they try to play really hard on emotional beats and wring feeling out of moments when they have just invested nothing in making you actually have those emotions by building out characters or doing basic movie stuff.
Oh, Truman, I wish my problems were only as deep as that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, we're going to get into it, and this is why I realize why I needed to make that acknowledgement about, not being an expert on all these things, because those are fundamentally issues I have with this movie being made. We'll get into them in much deeper context. The problem I have is more fundamental in terms of the types of stories we choose to tell, why we choose to tell them, who gets to tell them, how they're told, and what we ignore in the process of creating fluff. This movie, to me, is far more morally offensive than Loser ever could be.
Oh, okay. Well, that's where we're going to have to differ. Loser outright trivializes and promotes some pretty gross stuff, and
I'm not trying to dismiss that. I acknowledge that and say that this is even worse.
This movie, look, at least Landen, when in this movie, when all of the characters go to Nazi Germany for the 1936 Olympics, there are scenes of them driving past swastika flags and having kind of a concerned look on their face, just so you know they don't approve of that whole business.
The Nazi flags, oh my God, I've already got notes. I've already got notes.
Even Miss Lady back home just watching the newsreel, when they show Hitler on the newsreel, she's kind of like concerned by it in the theater. It's like, I know that we're not at war with them yet, and I know that I'm a white lady in America in the 30s, but I'm not sure I approve of this guy. Something seems off about this chancellor.
Oh my God. Okay, all right.
How about I explain what the movie's about? Should I explain what the movie's about?
The machine made us watch Boys in the Boat from 2023. Truman, try not to tip the boat with your synopsis.
In 1936, poverty-stricken orphan Joe Rance, played by Callum Turner, joins the JV crew team at the University of Washington in hopes of securing a part-time job to help him cover tuition. The team's no-nonsense coach, Al Ulbrichtson, played by Joel Edgerton, sets to work whipping Joe and the other 7 rowers on the squad into shape, and is shocked to discover that this scrappy group of working-class Joes are faster and stronger than the varsity team. The Boys in the Boat rack up wins at regattas around the United States, and Joe strikes up a relationship with Joyce, played by Hadley Robinson, an attractive classmate who aggressively pursues him. Following their success stateside, Coach Ulbrichtson enters the boys in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, where against all odds they pull off a photo-finish first-place victory, much to the consternation of German Chancellor Adolf Hitler, played by Daniel Philpott.
I mean, you had to credit the Hitler actor.
I mean, I knew that they were going to Nazi Germany. I kind of didn't expect the boys in the boat to actually have Hitler be in the movie. That was kind of an interesting. I'm not like necessarily mad at it, but it is weird to get crowd reaction shots of Hitler.
I'm fucking furious at it, Truman. I am so mad, and we're gonna get to it.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe if the boys in the boat had won a little bit harder, maybe Hitler wouldn't have done all that stuff, you know?
Okay, I don't want to preview all of my bits yet. We'll get to one that I have to get to before we even get into the specs of this thing. But let's just do a quick rundown of the cast and crew here.
Of the boys.
Directed and produced by George Clooney.
The Cloon Dog.
Co-produced by his partner Grant Heslov and Colin McDougall. This was written by Mark L. Smith, based on the book by Daniel James Brown. Not the Dan Brown of the of the Da Vinci Mysteries, but
and not James Brown, the musician, who I think would have written a much more interesting movie than this.
I didn't include Hitler in my main cast, but here's who I've got.
Wow, Hitler being left out. What a shame. What a shame.
Hitler, the only person I somewhat relate to in this movie, because he's the only person who walks out of the film.
Okay, a totally sick burn, the first of many tomahawk dunks on this movie, but you gotta be careful saying I relate to Hitler. Just...
Okay, that's a fair point, and I will
just take the note. Take the note.
Okay, all right. Joel Edgerton plays Coach Al Elbrickson. Callum Turner as Joe Rance. Hadley Robinson as Joyce Simdars. Chris Diamantopoulos as the newspaperman. His name's Royal Broham, but I don't think it's mentioned in the movie.
Learning the names of the boys in the boat is going to be a shock for me. I have no idea who any of these boys are.
I'm gonna here's a note I wrote earlier. I don't care burning it right now. I literally wrote at one point, who the hell are these guys? ... Oh, they're the boys in the boat.
The titular boys. You can be looking at a boy in this movie and not be sure if he's a boat boy or some other type of boy.
They aren't characters. They are just collectively the boys in the boat, except for Joe Rance.
Yeah, the boys are back in boat, and we're not differentiating them at all.
Should we go into some specs about this? And I'm just going to prepare you. I've got my first fiery tangent set up for the spec section.
I love that you are so locked and loaded for this that you skipped out on listing the rest of the cast and we're just like, fuck it, I don't know. There's a bunch of anonymous boys.
I mean, am I wrong?
I don't give a shit who the other people in this movie are. I mean, I don't mean disrespect to the people who made this movie. I hope your careers all do well. I think the performances are mostly fine. I just like this is just a movie about white guys with brown hair or black hair. And as two white guys with respectively brown and black hair, we should be plugged into that. But it's kind of hard to, at some point you get punch drunk from all of the different just bland dudes.
Maybe I'd feel differently if I also had a rower's body, which I do not.
I have
a roller's body.
Now, hey. I have... You're locked and loaded with a whole lot of thoughts about history and stuff. I have a whole lot of thoughts about bodies and how they should be featured in this movie. So it's kind of a yin and yang.
Okay, all right. Okay, this movie was released on Christmas Day. That's
Merry
December
Christmas.
25th. 2023. This is our most recent episode.
Yeah.
Like, this is newer than Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre.
Wow. God, that's clearly this film learned all of the lessons of a post-Operation Fortune world.
Dare I say, Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre is a more coherent film than this.
I don't know if you dare say that, although I would say that the protagonists in Operation Fortune experience about as much conflict as all of the characters in this movie do.
Oh, boy. This was released by Amazon Studios /MGM. Would you like to guess how many theaters this was in on Christmas Day 2023?
3,075.
You know what? if I had to guess, if I didn't have the number right in front of me, I would back you on that. I would say that sounds like a pretty dang good guess.
Did I sink your battle boat, though, or did I miss?
No. It is 2,557.
Wow, okay. The studio system decided to spare the American public from having to see too much of this film.
Well, I mean, that's still a damn lot of theaters.
It's a damn lot of theaters, but I'm sorry, no, to cut you off, though, it's kind of fucked. Gretel and Hansel, weird Oz Perkins Bugnuts film was in 3,000 theaters, and the glossy, based on a book your dad read, George Clooney award bait movie was in 2,500.
You know what this indicates to me is a area of research that I would like to do with this show is better understanding release strategies, the types of theaters that are out there. What does it mean when you release a movie like this into 2,500 theaters versus a smaller movie into 3,000? Like, what type of theaters are those going into? What counts as one of those theaters? Like, I don't know much about that, and I would like to.
Yeah, I know. I guess just seeing the word 2,500 theaters doesn't really tell you the whole story. There's a lot of different kinds, but then at the same time, it's like there's not that many different kinds of theater. There's basically like cool theaters, and then there's theaters in malls, right? I mean, I'm trying to think of what other types there are, and no offense to malls.
Here in the Midwest, most of our movie theaters are in malls. So,
listen, some of my favorite movie theaters in LA are/were in malls. I'm pouring one out for the ArcLight at the Sherman Oaks Galleria right now.
Yeah, and the Regent at the Landmark, but
yeah.
Okay.
Just two dudes sad about dead malls.
Sorry, I got really distracted. Okay, because I got to go into something confusing here. December 25th, 2023, Christmas Day. Guess what? That's a Monday.
What? Oh, that's
So, we have some odd numbers here for its box office debut ranking.
Okay.
On the day that it's released, on Monday, comes out at number 4 in the box office. Number four.
Yeah, I almost forgot about that. Okay. I'm sorry. I was so ready for more odd numbers that I completely forgot about our long abandoned number 4 hypothesis.
However, by the time, so like we talked a little bit during the last song, that movie was released on a Wednesday, and that came out number 1 on the first day. But then by the end of the weekend, when they tally box office receipts for the week, it had dropped to number 4.
Yeah.
This debuts at number 4, and then by the end of its week, which is longer because it's Monday, not Wednesday, that's 2 extra days for the box office. Am I explaining math right?
I mean, I'm not the guy to ask. It all checks out to me. I got like 400 on my SATs.
It drops to number 6. So its official opening weekend number is number 6.
I was so worried that it was going to go up in the rankings and be at like number 2 after a couple days, and that truly humanity is cursed and unworthy of God's love.
Or its box office placement kind of mirrors what happens with the boys in the boat in the final Olympic race. It starts in last and ends in first.
It's like, oh shit, we're actually in theaters, and then somehow they're the fastest.
Film critics had a field day with their daily headlines that week.
Oh, Landon, I do know that film critics had a field day with their headlines, which we will discuss.
Oh, I can't wait. All right. We're going to go through the whole top 10 this week because, boy, this is interesting. And listen, I learned my lesson after... after the massive learning experience. You know what? It was a teachable moment for us all to analyze what we're reading.
It's like a year-long teachable moment that will live forever, preserved on servers that we are in fact paying to keep up. Just a little twist of the knife there. Okay, right. Give us these box office numbers.
Okay, before I go through these, what I think is just interesting though is like this was very recent. So when we go through these, tell me what you think is already forgotten.
Okay.
All right. And maybe in what way? Like, oh, I remember that movie existing. What happened in it? Did I see it? So here we go. I'm going to go starting at the top and go to the bottom. So number 1 in its third week in a row. So number one for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Wonka.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me. I am very much I'm very aware of Wonka, but maybe just because I was on an international flight recently where 7 different people were watching it. And that I think
it exploded onto streaming services recently because it's not only on Max, it's on Tubi, I think.
It's a really good movie to watch people watching on a plane, I think. You can check in and out whenever you want. You don't have to hear anything. Sets look interesting. Dancing.
Okay. Number 2 in its second week is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom.
Okay. I do remember that came out, although it might just be because I listened to podcasts where people were sort of dunking on it a bit. That is the end of the DC universe, right?
I think the Flash is technically the end.
But the writing was on the
not.
wall in that. That was the last one they made where at the time of release they were like planning to make
I think
more of them.
that sounds right. Yeah, I've kind of like, you know what is forgettable to me is just general superhero movie discourse. So that goes in one ear out the other.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on then.
Number 3 in its second week, something I see flying into our screens in the machine in the future.
Yeah.
Migration.
Is that What If Ducks had comedy? What if Ducks did a barnyard?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's boy, I feel that one coming. My war wound is aching. I can feel a forgotten movie.
I remember more about the Priceline tie-in to that, the Priceline tie-in commercial to that movie than I do about the actual commercial for the movie.
I mainly remember walking past standees for it in theaters and thinking, wow, I guess they're really doing it. They're really doing a duck movie, huh? Which was kind of also what my relationship with Spies in Disguise was for like 2.5 to 3 years.
Yeah. Okay, next up, number 4 is The Color Purple, the secret musical. To me, that began the trope. Maybe Wonka was in there a little bit too, where it's like, musicals don't sell, so let's hang a trailer together, making it look like a movie without music, and something that they continued into last year with the Wicked trailer.
I think that we have really lived through a golden era of studios greenlighting musicals and then getting data that makes them scared to promote musicals as musicals and then trying to hide musicals.
That's why I was so flummoxed by the Wicked trailer, because I'm like, this is based on the biggest Broadway musical in the last 20 years. How are you trying to tell me it's not a musical?
That was the thing, and I'm not the target audience for Wicked. I don't foresee myself seeing Wicked, but seeing those trailers, I'm thinking like, well, the most interesting thing you've got going for you is big song and dance numbers. You're not showing me any of them, so it looks like you're trying to make like a movie about witches going to college together. This doesn't look good without the other stuff to fill it out. I think that the runaway success of Wicked has put an end to the era of studios being afraid that their musicals won't make money. So I think that here's my first prediction. We are entering an era where now there will be song and dance numbers featured in musical trailers. Watch it happen.
Okay, well, time will tell. All right, let's go through this a little bit faster, but there are some notable things I want to mention here. So, number 5, the Glenn Powell, Sydney Sweeney, Anyone But You rom-com.
Oh, yeah.
Thematically has something that I want to mention in this episode, or in this movie.
Good-looking
Number
physiques.
6, as we mentioned, Boys in the Boat. Number 7, the movie I was in theater seeing at the time, The Iron Claw.
Yes. Speaking of men with wonderful bodies.
Next up, Ferrari.
Speaking of movies for dads.
Cars have bodies.
Thank you, Tim Allen.
Then I wanted to mention this because it is another movie starring today's star, Callum Turner. Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
Right. Yes, we're doing the Hunger Games again, but I hear this time it's actually pretty good.
I didn't hear that, but I didn't hear anything. So what do I know?
It's not like the original ones were bad. I don't know. I just remember hearing people go like, "Oh, this new thing is actually pretty good," but not enough for me to go see it.
You know what? I'm getting dubious of the actually pretty good compliment, where it's like, to me that's saying, you know what? It's not great, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I think we've just become complacent in what we expect from movies.
I listen. After reading a lot of reviews for this, I think that yes, actually pretty good is maybe a little too kind for a lot of films.
All right, finally, we got The Boy and the Heron, the Miyazaki film, coming in at number 9, and then finally, probably one of my favorite films of 2023, Godzilla -1.
Ah, yes, that was a banger. A movie that is also about boys in a boat.
That's true, yeah.
Although that movie does a much better job of developing and establishing the characters of the boys and investing in the relationships between the boys.
Okay, how many weeks did this film stay in theaters? 12. And how many weeks was it in the top 10 box office? 4 of those. 12. And I'm going to mention this just because, you know what, this episode is going to be depressing, and I'm not going to have a chance to say this.
Enjoy.
The 4 weeks in the top 10, it comes in at 6699.
Yeah, and he is doing the thumb and pinky finger out and rocking his hand back and forth. Landon is full Jimmy Buffett concert mode now.
Okay, now I told you I had a tangent early on in this, and here's where it's gonna come into play. The budget for this movie, is approximately $80 to $90 million.
But
yes,
but
yeah,
I would argue though, it's kind of all up there on screen, but not for the reasons you'd want it to be. Not
bullshit, and I have supporting evidence to my argument.
But please proceed. Let's hear it.
Okay. Well, let me finish out this top 10 or the box office stuff here, which is on an $80 to $90 million budget. Domestically, this movie makes $52.6 million. Internationally, $2.9 million.
Oof.
For a total box office take of $55.5 million. Yes, that's right. That was a loss of $34.5 million.
Yes, and that's just on the production budget, to say nothing of the marketing budget.
Okay, here is the first, and maybe thematically we'll go deeper in this later in this episode, but the first issue, capital I issue, I have with this film, and the fucking reason you tell this goddamn story, if you do, Jesse fucking Owens.
That was his middle name?
Yep. Hidden from history for so many years. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
If you're going to tell the story about the 1936 Olympics in Berlin and America's place in it, you have to fucking tell the story of Jesse fucking Owens. Like, who the fuck gives a shit about 8 white boys in a boat winning one race when Jesse Owens, a black man from America, going into Hitler's Germany with the, all of the issues going on over there at the time.
Oh, okay, now both sides, they did build a pretty good highway. There's that also.
Well, okay, I'm going to get into that too later, but...
Wait, you've got Autobahn stuff? You've got Autobahn stuff for the movie about rowing? Did we watch the same film?
Not specifically Audubon stuff, but okay. I was shocked to learn that, because the second that I realized what this movie was, I'm like, 1936 Olympics, is Jesse Owens going to make an appearance in this film? Like, are we going to acknowledge the race issue, what the fucking world stage was looking at during that time? Or are we just going to tell this whitewashed story about 8 boys rowing to victory in one race?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's how they acknowledge the race issue. They show these white boys winning multiple races, so they've handled that.
Well, I'm glad you picked up on the double entendre there of the word race, because there's a film called Race from 2016 about Jesse Owens going to the 1936 Winter Olympics. I checked this movie out of the library just on a whim to like balance the scales. If I have to watch this stupid fucking rowing movie, I'm gonna like do my due diligence and watch the Jesse Owens story. Unfortunately, this is one of the only especially recent movies about Jesse Owens, so I checked it out.
I'm just shocked that there haven't been a whole bunch of Jesse Owens movies. One might think that I would have done that research, but I was looking at other stuff. I just sort of assumed, like, oh, well, they've probably made like 15 Jesse Owens movies, right? I mean, no, they haven't?
No. To my knowledge, it hasn't have a definitive story told about it yet.
Guys!
Now, here's the thing. When I checked this out, I thought this was, as I call them, Redbox movies. Like, oh, this is just something that they, were able to cobble together and put it out maybe, on one of those inspirational channels or something. But then, Truman, oh my God, my jaw dropped when I saw this film was released in the theater February 19th, 2016 to 2,369 theaters. Just about as much as the fucking Boys in the Boat.
I love that you like found another movie that the machine could serve us in this process. Like you got a stealth second forgotten movie served to you. The coach role that we have here, played by Joel Edgerton, Jason Sudeikis. What? Oh my God!
in a completely miscast role.
Yeah, Jason Sudeikis could never play the coach of a sporting event. I just could not see that working for him.
Well, it was a dramatic role, and he was like tackling issues about race and stuff. It also has William Hurt. It has Jeremy Irons. But that's not what I want to get into. What I want to get into is this movie also opened number 6 in its debut weekend. It was in the theater for only 9 weeks as opposed to 12. It had a $5 million budget. And on that $5 million budget, grossed $19.1 domestically, $4.6 internationally, for $23.7 million total, which is $18.7 million profit compared to $34.5 deficit to The Boys in the Boat.
And also based on the fact that I had really no awareness of this movie called Race, presumably the marketing budget was a lot smaller on that one too.
True. However, when you said that all of the money is up there on the screen, what they do on a $5 million budget of actually showing the construction of Nazi Germany's, Olympia Stadium and the country surrounding it, like this movie, The Boys in the Boat, for a $90 million budget is like shots of boys on water and inside of like dance halls. There is not much on the screen.
I agree there's not much on the screen in terms of something that you look at it and are impressed by it. But when I look at the many, many, many long shots of spectators filing into an arena to watch a boat race, I'm sitting there thinking, well, okay, you got probably 50 to 100 extras in this scene. Each of them is making whatever kind of day rate. Each of them has to be fitted for an old-timey costume. There's old-timey set dressing around them. Some of these shots, these are extras who you've got loaded on boats who are on the water and your camera boat is on the water. Like, that'll balloon your production costs in a major way. And I almost feel like part of why we get so many extraneous shots of just people in seersucker suits holding champagne wandering over to watch the regatta is because George Clooney, well, it's because George Clooney, I think, really likes old-timey shit, and we'll get into that soon, but also because it's just like, no, I wrote the fucking checks. We paid for all of these extras. We're gonna show it. We're gonna put it up there.
Yeah, but there is a decision that is made before that where they're like, okay, what are we going to put our money towards? And someone has to go, what if we did extras and costuming them rather than doing wider shots where we can CG people and actually show the development of what the fucking, structures that they're coming into. This movie has no interest at
So
all
bad.
in exploring what the U.S. Olympic any of the World Olympic teams were walking into in terms of Hitler building a new Germany. What the fuck was going into that? Why they were making the decisions? Like, it's just the boys row and they want to get to the Olympics. And then, have you heard about this Hitler guy? And then Hitler is in the stands at one of their races, and that's all they wrote about Nazis in this fucking movie.
It's sort, I mean, it does feel sort of like cardboard cutouts. I mean, but also the movie doesn't really have a lot of interest in showing much of anything. I mean, they do two different regattas in the United States, one in Washington, one in upstate New York, and the way you can tell the difference is the one in New York, there are more trees on the sides of the river and are like kind of a hill. I mean, look, I agree in a major way with your point of who the fuck gives a shit. But I want to say, like, I think it is, in theory, impressive that a team of rowers who were all kind of from working class or marginalized backgrounds, albeit white guys, but like poorer white people, were able to excel in such a way at a ritzy, upper class, preppy sport. I think that is interesting. I think that there is a way to tell that story that the audience can then think, oh, that's interesting, and not instead see the cameo from Jesse Owens and be like, can I just get that guy? That guy's thing seems more interesting. Like, there's a way that this story... Like, I think that the history and the facts of this are interesting, not as interesting as Jesse Owens' stuff, and it could have been conveyed in a way that was interesting, but the choice was made to not do that at great expense.
I don't 100% disagree with you. Generally speaking, I think the historical context for this particular Olympic Games doesn't hold true to that statement, though. If you're going to tell any story about the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin, it's got to kind of fucking be that thing. Like,
yes,
you can't tell a small story that happened within it. Because you know what? Jesse Owens was also fucking poor. Like,
nothing that the boys in the boat went through, none of their problems were anywhere near the level of problems that Jesse Owens was going through. When we're talking about American athletes who competed in Berlin in 1936, the most interesting one is always going to be Jesse Owens. That I will grant you.
That's my thing. Like, I don't mind the idea of watching a rowing crew work their way to the Olympics and win in any other Olympics except the 1936 Olympics. Like, so that's where I agree with you. Like, there is a way to make this an interesting story, just not here. This is a Cecil situation. Give me a fictionalized version of this that isn't, like, set it in 1937, in Barcelona or some other fucking place where I'm like, oh, I know we're in a fictional world because the Olympics, only happen on even number years.
Yeah, exactly. Give us an alternate history thing. Mm-hmm. I love this because I also was thinking about Cecil Gaines in The Butler, a movie which, if you didn't listen to that episode, is one where it was inspired by true events, and we dinged that movie kind of because they took this true story about an actual guy who was a White House butler and then told a story about a fictional character and injected a bunch of kind of salacious shit into that life story to juice it up and make a movie out of it. We were critical of that. I was critical of that. Now, having seen the flip side of it, I now kind of wish that they had juiced this up with some fake shit. Because, okay, at the end of this movie, I'm gonna just smash cut to the end. At the very end of this movie, they show a picture of the actual 1936 rowers.
One of the biggest tropes I hate in these biopic movies.
Like many things in this movie, it is eminently predictable and right down the middle. But the picture, though, of the actual boys from the boat, they're all standing there shirtless in their little swim trunks, holding their oars, and you look at them, and these guys are like completely ripped and shredded in a Ralph Lauren model type way that you really don't see in pictures from the 1930s. Like, if you see like a a buff guy in a picture from the 30s. He's like a circus muscle man with like dumbbells. He's a big beefy dude.
Yeah.
So I know this is based on a true story. So maybe there's a very good reason they didn't do this, but this movie could have stood to be so much hornier. It would, if this movie had been this movie should have been hornier, and Landon, it should have been gayer. I'm sorry.
I totally agree with you. And I have to check myself a little bit, because looking at the Letterboxd reviews, a lot of people had that reaction to it. They're like, Callum Turner in short shorts? Those aren't short enough for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's weird, for one thing, that we see more skin in the picture of the actual historical boys from the boat. Like, the archival materials are like sexier and more alluring than any of the actual actors in the movie. Like, just in terms, like, so there's that. But I just think, like, so much of this movie is about this group of guys who don't really have any connection to rowing. They seem to have largely joined the team because inexplicably being on the rowing team gives you a part-time job. I don't get that.
Yes.
But they all join the team for that reason. They don't have any background with it. And then in the process of becoming really good rowers, I mean, they undergo obviously a physical transformation. They have to gain a lot of strength to do this. This is They should. Like, they undergo a transformation in terms of becoming this team. It stands to reason, based on what we know about rowing, that your body transforms as well. Yep. These are guys who underwent a dramatic physical transformation as a result of their participation in rowing. It's a movie all about rhythmic power and synchronicity and using your body to affect that. It would be thematically appropriate for the movie to explore how the boys in the boat feel about their bodies and other stuff that they're doing with them.
I do not disagree with you at all about any of this, except that the movie's about that. I don't think the movie is about that. Rowing is about that. It should be about that. This movie is not about rhythmic anything.
Well, the movie includes many, and I mean many, shots of rhythmic action, bodies thrusting back and forth as they row a boat around. So it would, like, on a visual level, that could be
so much more rhythmic-y, though. I mean, this puts me in mind of, like, what the fuck would Luca Guadagnino do with this movie? With the Atticus Ross, Trent Reznor score, like, okay, we're getting too far afield, because there's a lot of stuff I want to circle back to, but there's a little bit of a compass I need to reestablish here before we get real deep into breaking all this down, which is the question we always ask, which is, where was this on your radar when this came out, and had you seen this before, et cetera, et cetera. So, what was your boat knowledge, your boat boys knowledge before this?
I had no knowledge of the boat boys. Maybe perhaps there was a banner ad on, you know what it probably was. I was probably reading a New Yorker article online, and there was a banner ad for this movie in the middle of some column about Palestine or something.
What about the book, the international bestseller?
I mean, no, I was not aware, Landon, of the book about a sport, and I mean, that alone, books about sports, nah, dog. But then also the second least likely sport that I would ever want to read about, the only one further ahead of it being golf. So
interesting. Okay,
this missed me completely. What about you?
All right, so I kind of knew about this in that I had got the book for my mom for Christmas a couple years ago, and I knew it was set during World War II, but for some reason the title brought to mind, I guess before World War II, around that era. But
shit was popping off in Europe, kind of, but like it wasn't World War II for us, the Americans, the main characters of history.
But okay, during the Depression in that era, I knew it was set during that time, but I guess it's more the title, The Boys in the Boat, evoked World War II imagery to me, and I thought it was like men from the Navy being capsized, like stranded in a survival boat after their ship being capsized, and like a story of how they were rescued and their endurance on the high seas or something like that.
You were expecting more of a Poseidon type story.
Yes, exactly. Not rowing. That's not what I expected.
Look, the only thing that the title called to mind for me is the song Supertramp, where at one point Rick James goes, "She likes the boys in the band," and I just, the whole time, anytime this movie comes up, "She likes the boys in the boat, the girl's a super freak."
So, okay, before this episode, I had not seen the movie, did not read the book. Since this episode,
oh no,
I have read the book. I have watched the movie. I have watched Race, the Jesse Owens story. I rewatched the 2-part Leni Riefenstahl Olympic documentary, Olympia.
Wow. Okay, really, truly getting both sides of the issue.
And I'm glad I did. Again, we'll get to it. But I wrote a note here after watching this movie, after reading the book and all this stuff, all this research on it. And this is the only time I think I don't want to say that. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I'm going to say this now, though. Only time this season, my note was, I am not going to watch this movie a second time. No one can fucking make me.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I watched this one time.
I was very much, as this movie was wrapping up, I was like, this is the last time I will ever watch this. I don't feel like there's key fact. I went out and I watched another film also to kind of like flesh things out more, and typically when I do that, I want to then go back and watch the original movie again, so it's good and fresh. And in this case, it's like, nah, dog, it's good. It's in there. I got it. I've got a grasp on this movie. I know everything there is I need to know.
Yeah. Okay, so I needed to get Leni Riefenstahl in there because she's an interesting and impossible not to talk about aspect of this film today.
Okay, wow. Well, that's great. Hey, awesome girl bosses from history. Just don't ask who her boss was. So, if I may,
you may.
I don't like sports. This is a thing. And as a result of that, I don't really seek out sports movies. But there are sports movies that I like. I think that there are ways to tell a story about sports that's really good. I like The Natural. I like Ted Lasso. I enjoyed Next Goal Wins. And obviously, I utterly loved Challengers. I think that a good sports movie and one that succeeds is one that can appeal to people like me. And the way that you do that and reach out to people who are not necessarily sports fanatics is you tell a character-driven story in which sports are the medium through which the protagonist deals with their problems.
Yeah.
And the protagonist's ability to be successful at sports is a direct result of them having fixed their problems. And I think the main thing about The Boys in the Boat is it's really just, the movie is really just telling you, these boys in this boat can row really fucking well. Look at them go. And it is never interested in, like, what are their problems? How do they solve them? How does that make them good?
Yeah, well, and I mean, I would say for most sports movies, it's not even really, I mean, yeah, there might be, like, individual character problems, but really it's more the teamwork aspect of it. The how do people come together? These different personalities come together for the greater good, and achieve success together. And there's a clear movie I would rather everybody go watch if you've been living in a cave and haven't already seen it. The best version of this movie is fucking Cool Runnings.
This movie could have been improved with John Candy, but that's true of every film, so it's not a revolutionary statement.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of especially team sports, that's, I think, the thrust of most of those narratives is like, how are these boys going to set their own stuff aside?
Yes.
And work for the greater whole, and in doing so, let go of their egos and be able to solve their own problems, as you said. Okay, and so then I guess that brings me to a point that I need to mention about a big problem I have with this, which is this film unsuccessfully, and I don't think there is a successful way of doing this, tries to highlight American exceptionalism
and
individualism, but that is completely antithetical to, like,
rowing,
a team coming together and having to set ego aside. Like, it wants to get behind the patriotism of America, but the very core of a sports team thing, it kind of has a socialist, underpinning to it.
and yes, and more so in rowing than any other team sport. As they explain in the movie, these guys have to be in perfect sync. Even the slightest, even one of them being a little bit off, that will slow them down and they'll lose. This is the this is the sport where individualism is the least important and teamwork is the most important.
Yeah. And yet the movie tries to hang itself on exceptionalism and individualistic kind of story structure, which just it's fundamentally broken. I know I've said that about films before, but
this movie mainly centers on Joe Rance, Callum Turner's character, and we're following him through the whole thing. There are 7 other boys in the boat, and they are, as we've said, completely interchangeable. One of the other boys in the boat looks an awful lot like Landon's and my friend Ben, so that guy stood out to me.
He's the
I like
coxswain.
Ben. No, he's not the coxswain. He's the guy who
not?
is kind of sick in Germany, but then the coxswain motivates him to row
I thought the
faster by
coxswain also
singing.
looked like Ben.
Oh, okay. Okay, so to our friend Ben, who may or may not be listening to this episode, you might actually get more out of the boys in the boat than anyone else because you have at least 2 doppelgangers in it.
I would rather watch Ben on the boat than Boys in the Boat.
I would rather watch Ben on the boat too. He'd have a great time. He's been doing paddleboarding now, actually, and it's been working out for him. But like the story here, the good version of this story is it's a story about these 8 guys and what their relationships are like, and how their relationships go from their relationships with each other go from fractious to fixed and coordinated, and translating that to, and then they're winning all these boat races.
And yet, though, like, I don't know any of these fucking characters, like, at all. Another good version of this movie, A League of Their Own.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Where I understand each of the individual characters, their needs, their problems, their personalities, and I see how they need to work together, and therefore, because they're so separate and different, I can cheer for them even more when they come together. This is just a bunch of the same looking dude doing the same thing and needing to set their personality aside in order to succeed. And so, like, it's completely unsatisfying to follow it from a character perspective.
But what personality are they setting aside? Because most of these guys, like,
yeah,
there is a scene late in the movie. They are on the train to, well, they're not on the train from America to Germany, but I think they're on a train in Germany or something like that. But
okay.
Joe Rance, the main guy, he lives in like a shanty town. He's homeless and he's an orphan. His parents abandoned him. It's very sad. Don't abandon your kids. He's had some issues with his dad at one point, post the abandonment, and after dealing with those, he's walking through the train past his teammates, and one of the teammates says, "Hey, Hobo Joe, where are you going?" He's just goofing around, and Joe like gets up and starts brawling with him, and the guys all separate them. And I'm watching that scene, and it was jarring to me in it, with about 30 minutes left in the movie. Oh, this is like the first time I've seen the boys in the boat like talk to each other in a group setting that I've seen any. Oh, they have nicknames for each other, some sense of camaraderie. Otherwise, there are a few scenes of the boys hanging out together where they are all singing. You know, there's one of them right after they make the team. They're all sitting around an oil drum fire singing the University of Washington fight song. And as
one boy is nervous around girls and can sing.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. Yeah, there's one of them all sweeping up an old ballroom on campus, and one of them starts playing the piano, and then later they cajole him into getting up on stage and playing the piano for a group of people at a dance. And there's some scenes of them at parties where they're like individually flirting with girls
that all also look alike.
Yeah. but there's just not really any relationships between these boys in this boat at all. The most we see them together is when they're all rowing and not talking to each other, and we're just sort of meant to believe, oh my god, it's awesome how well they're rowing, but we never are told why they are rowing well.
Yeah. Oh god, I don't even know where to start with the poverty question in this film. Like, it's such a bludgeoning instrument that it is such a cheap fucking shortcut to trying to pull on our sympathies that I have disdain for. Like, early on when he's in the shantytown before he goes to school, Joe Rance is like, he's got a hole in his shoe, and so he tears up a newspaper and puts it in his shoe to cover the hole. And like, I get that's what people did, but like, it's just like that imagery without any like anything behind it. And it's that level of poverty porn throughout that we're just supposed to be pulling, playing on this idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That makes my stomach turn a little bit.
My issue, honestly, is not that it's like poverty porn. My issue is not too much poverty porn. My issue is not enough poverty porn. Because it's like, at the beginning of the movie, yes, he's living in a burnt-out car and walking into the city to go to college every day. He doesn't have enough money to pay his tuition, so he has to join the rowing team because, and we'll get to it, for some reason they give you a part-time job as a janitor if you're on the JV rowing team at the University of Washington.
Yeah.
Is it a New Deal program? What's going on? And and another recurring thing, at least at first, is he's always hungry. Like, he can't afford to buy lunch at school. He's eating beans out of a can in his car by candlelight, like a cartoon hobo. And so this is out there at the beginning of the movie, but then once he joins the rowing team, his poverty kind of just disappears. He is living with the rowing team now. Kind of. He has the job. He can pay his tuition, and it goes away. But then it kind of comes back as they're going to the Olympics, and it's like, these working class boys, these hard scrabble chaps, and it's like, well, we're not seeing a lot of indication of the socioeconomic status of the other 7 boys. We're not really getting how does Joe feel in relation to these other guys? Is he ashamed of his circumstances? Presumably, some of these other boys must be from somewhat more privileged backgrounds. Sure. This is 7 college guys.
This is why I agree with you. Like, this needs to go in the opposite direction, in one direction or the other, as far as this using poverty as a motivating factor for the story and the characters, because this version of it is like poverty as a superpower. There's moments when he's, someone suggests they go get something to eat, and he's like, I'm not that hungry, after just like a huge practice where he put his body to the test. Like, he's not going to go eat because he's poor, but he can go and help build the boat with this old dude that gives him wisdom throughout the film. And it's what it's doing is like, he's poor, and that's all the motivation he needs to be the best he can be, and no one can take that away from him, because he knows what it's like to not have anything, and he's willing to work as hard as it takes to get where he wants to go. And it fucking is disgusting.
And he's not asking for any handouts, and he doesn't want a participation trophy. No, he's just gonna knuckle through, because that's the American way.
I hate it. It bothers me to such a degree that I think it's gross negligence for, like, what really bothers me is, like, this is the sort of thing that they tap into, these sorts of stories tap into to make people feel good about themselves. And it's coming at the behest of people who actually go through this shit, and we suddenly are wondering why we don't want to invest in Social Security. We don't want to invest in programs to help, the underprivileged, because they're like, if they just fucking worked harder, look at fucking Joe Rance. He fucking won an Olympic medal because he worked hard. He wanted it and pulled himself out of poverty. Like, that shit fucking sucks. And I hate that there are inspirational movies that glorify this shit.
And it's like, I think it's interesting that a guy who is, like, not eating enough was able to row well enough to make the cut for this team as a complete outsider to rowing. There's an interesting story of triumph and hardship there that can be inspirational on its merits, but what this movie kind of suggests is just he just wanted it more than everybody else.
Yeah.
And
the book does go into the gradients a little bit more, but it doesn't get past the general question that both of us have of like, why is this the story you're telling?
Yeah.
Like, the book to me is like the writer went into the museum in Washington and saw the boat and like a little plaque underneath it and thought, there's a story there that no one has written about before. What if I go write that story? And like, it feels so devoid of any passion. It's just like, okay, I'm going to go, there's an Olympic story. There's a book in that. I'm going to go pursue this book, and giving no real thought to like the other stories that haven't been told about the 1936 Olympics yet.
And I think also part of the difficulty is that, like, again, I do think that this story is interesting, but maybe there just isn't enough documentation or source material on an authorial level to like maybe these guys didn't keep diaries, maybe the interviews with them didn't go super deep, so there's just not a lot of information about what were these guys actually going through, what were their lives actually like. So the book, you write the facts, and then the movie comes along and it's like, well, let's just do what the book has, and so there's not a lot of you can't tell the authentically true story of what these guys went through because these guys have passed away and maybe the story wasn't properly documented in the proper depth at the time. So then what the movie that you've got is just sort of a retelling of a basic set of facts that really glides over the top of all of the structural issues that have a lot of relevance today going on beneath it, of the poverty, of racism and things like that.
At the risk of going into a full book report, here's kind of what the thrust of the film or the book is. The author found Joe Rance in his old age. As we see in here, he's an old man looking out at a lake, watching kids in the 80s rowing on a lake.
Folks, if in case you were wondering, yes, we do see the protagonist of this movie as an old person thinking about his entire life. That's the only way you know it's a biopic.
So the author found Joe like at the end of his life. This movie doesn't make it look like he was about to die, but the book makes it a little bit more like that. And he's like, I want to tell this story before I go. So the entire book, as far as the boys and the boats story, is told through Joe Rance's perspective, which biases it. So I think the author knew, there's not much of a story here. And so he fills the book out more with Joe Rance's background, being, kicked out of the house. Like, he goes much more into his issues with his father and his family, more into the romance with Joyce. And then it was like, that's still not enough. And then toes the line to something interesting, but doesn't go full enough into it to really make it do anything, which is talking a little bit about what was going on in Berlin at that time of building a new Germany. The whole ideology, the awful ideology that was growing there, and the part that Leni Riefenstahl played in terms of getting that image on the world stage, like, that's there a little bit. The book really made me want to see like an Eric Larson version of this story, where it's like, there's a huge missed opportunity for me of like the parallels between the precision that goes into sculpting your body, into rowing, as you said, like, you have to be in unison, like the parallels between that and like the obsessive nature of creating, Nazi architecture and just the world in which that hierarchy of power was constructed. Like, there is a clear connective tissue between those things, not explored at all in the book and definitely not in the movie. But the fact that German stuff was in the book and is completely absent from this movie was, again, I think, negligence. And also just like, why would you choose to leave the most interesting part of the story out of it?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that this movie is pretty boring throughout, but I get I got a lot more interested in it once they get to Germany at the end, and once they're driving past swastika flags and guys in uniforms. Not because I like that stuff, but because it's like, oh, hey, they're going into history. So
you have a $90 million budget. Why can't you hang like an actual Nazi flag? Every Nazi flag in this film is CGI.
Okay, I'm glad you clarified that, because for a second I'm like, oh, dude, are you really into specific details of swastika flags? How carefully have you memorized?
No, not at all. But like, it's a certain kind of cheap CGI quality. There's a moment when Joel Edgerton's walking out of the building. It's supposed to be in Germany, and they're talking to the high counselor about their placement on the track of, like, they place a certain place, so they should be like second or third in the lineup, and they're eighth, they're the furthest out. Anyway, they're talking and they exit this building, and just like it's almost like they don't want to like really put the Nazi thing out there. Like, yeah, they're in Nazi Germany, but we're gonna put the flag kind of way in the background, like hanging off this building. But it wasn't even on set. Like, it was clearly like shot at some building, some university campus on UCLA or something like that, and they just CGI'd in a Nazi flag in the background.
I mean, and now listen, I fully agree with you, but also I'm just trying to, if I'm looking at this as George Clooney, director and producer, it's like, oh man, finding a college campus with these old-timey buildings where they'll let me hang a swastika flag for an entire day is going to be a bear. Let's just do it at UCLA.
I get that, but like, you can't fucking tackle this kind of content without like fully going for it. Like,
yes,
why even flirt with it if you're not going to like go, we need to embrace everything about the story, and that includes set decoration. Like, I don't know, there's just like it's such a fucking weak ass way of approaching this content that bothers me on a fundamental level.
And look, I think that weakness hits the story as well, because so here again, and we're not really going to go through the beat by beat of the movie, but fortunately this movie is incredibly simple. We're following Joe around in Washington. Act 1 of the movie is him joining the team, and then a tight 7 to 15 rowing montages to show how they get good at rowing, and they win a regatta in Washington. They beat Berkeley. Then they go to a regatta in New York, and they beat a bunch of other Ivy League dorks out there. And meanwhile, Joe and Joyce are falling in love. And then after winning that regatta, it's like, oh, we qualified for the Olympics. And then there's a whole dumb interlude where they have to raise money to go to the Olympics. It's so stupid. But then they're in Germany. I think that another way that you make this movie more interesting just on a story level is just have the whole movie be the team in Germany and like them training in Germany for a couple weeks. And it's just, you can have allusions and flashbacks to what's going on in their past, but just have it be about the boys and the boys working out their shit and trying to get their relationships sorted out. They're in this pressure cooker environment of all of America's eyes are on us. We're not even supposed to be here. We are in a somewhat hostile environment at the moment. Very, very Nazi-y.
Our listeners, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I think, you know what? We have a lot of hate for this movie, but I think we are keeping it more in check than certain European governments in the 1930s. I just think, that there is a tighter, more focused story that you can tell there. But what they've got here, where they're trying to tell the whole story start to finish, it is just so diluted by... Like, look, they either needed to zoom out. To tell this story right, you either need to zoom out far enough that you are doing a mini-series where each episode you're focusing on a boy and what are his troubles, what is his past, what brought him to the boat, or you need to zoom in tight enough that it's just about them in a very short time period and focused in on that. But taking this kind of halfway view, you don't get close enough to anything to understand the stakes of the characters, and it just doesn't click.
Okay, so I hate. Okay, I mean, fuck it. I'm just gonna embrace it. I mean, look at this, Truman. Look, okay.
Landon is wearing glasses.
What I'm doing.
They're so far down his nose. Whatever will he? An index finger pushing them up his nose. Oh, what a Poindexter I'm talking to. Oh no, who can guess what he'll say next?
Actually, we're gonna have a little history lesson here.
God.
on both ends of this. So, one thing that they consolidate is a potential for interesting conflict and just development of things. At the University of Washington, there wasn't just one boat that there were 8 spots for and one reserve. There were multiple boats, and the coach and the dynamic of the rowers was constantly in rotation of who are going to be the main 8. And this week, you aren't cutting it, and therefore you're being demoted to another boat. And I'm going to bring someone up from that boat up to the main boat until we find the right combination of boys for the boat.
They're mixing and matching boys.
There's a lot of dramatic potential there. And, if you really want to get into who are these boys, how do they bond, why are they the right boys for this particular boat, you could have gone into that. And yes, you might have needed to have a 3-hour movie or a miniseries to cover that. The flip side of that, to your point of you either need to zoom in or zoom out. If you can zoom out, you can include stuff like that. If you zoom in, though, I think you start to realize this shouldn't have been a book, for one thing. It was probably an article at best, and definitely not a movie, especially not a movie that is in lieu of telling fucking other essential stories that need to be told about the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Here's what happens during the rowing events during the 1936 Berlin Olympics.
Okay.
America wins this race. One race for gold.
Yeah.
Germany wins the gold for every other rowing event. So what makes this particular 6-minute race worth it? Why does this story need to be told about this particular win when we were dominated in the sport by Germany in every other race?
I mean, it makes it interesting that this is the one, these specific guys had some special juice that no other country on Earth could match. But they
lost in the other ones.
Well, was it these same boys in this boat who lost all the other matches?
I think so. That's where I wanted to check myself to say I'm not an expert, and where I feel like the author and these filmmakers are being negligent in showing us the full story about this.
Look, I mean, and I didn't do the sports research, so maybe we're a bad podcast now. I mean, if the case is that, because I know there's multiple different types of rowing events, and these guys were only training for the 8-man crew event, so maybe there's different levels of crew events that Germany dominated all the other ones. If that is the case, that Germany was winning at every other form of rowing, but that America only won at this one, that does point to an interesting story of what did these guys have that made them so good at it, but then it just further underlines how poorly the movie bungles telling that story.
Yes.
Because these guys, as presented in the movie, do not seem particularly special. They do not seem to care a whole lot about rowing just naturally. They seem like just a bunch of happy-go-lucky dopes who like to dance and sing a ragtime song and talk to cute girls.
They're poor. At least Joe is poor.
No, they seem to all be poor because one of the lines in the ragtime song that they all sing a couple of different times is, "And we ain't got money." And when that comes up, they all sing it really loud, pumping their fists in the air because they ain't got money.
Okay, so I just want to juxtapose this with the real story of Jesse Owens, which, again, I'm not an expert on that, but he single-handedly won 4 gold medal in track and field events. I mean, Germany still won overall as far as the country in track and field, but he was one person who won 4 gold medals, and being who he was and the color of his skin standing in direct contrast to the ideology that was bubbling underneath but never really addressed during this controversial Olympics. That is, if you want to talk about American exceptionalism, if that's the sort of story you want to talk about, and individualism and overcoming odds and oppression and poverty and everything, why are we fucking spending time at all talking about these fucking 8 poor boys when you got Jesse Owens, who did single-handedly what all 8 of these did on his own 4 times.
And yeah, look, I agree with that. Listen, I think that at some point I come down to like, well, this book got written, this movie got made. Like, I agree there should have been more attention on Jesse Owens, and still there should be more attention on Jesse Owens. But at some point it's like, look, I think if, like, the book probably got written because this guy was like, oh man, everyone's, there's already been books about Jesse Owens in 1936, but another inspirational story from the same Olympics that I can kind of do as like, hey, did you know this was also happening? Okay. Like, I can see that niche as an author trying to spin a book out there and find a lane, which I think is a thing that they try to do in rowing, to be successful in. And then, of course, like, okay, a book was successful, it must be made into a movie. That's in the Constitution. So, like, I agree with you once again. Jesse Owens has the better story, and also, honestly, on a screenwriting level, it is easier to write a compelling story about an individual overcoming something than it is to write a story about 8 different dudes with individual characters that are established all coming together as one. So that is just more of a layup for a story.
But, okay, this is where the real fucking existential depression comes in for me. Because it's more the question of, why are we telling this story? Like you just said, as, you illuminated the process that happens and why things get made. A book was written, and because a book was written, a movie was made about it. And a movie was made, and therefore people went to go see it. Not enough to turn a profit, but, like, the fact that the Jesse Owens movie on a $5 million budget turned an $18 million profit, and this lost $34 million, not including marketing. Why are we still telling these sorts of stories? It's a matter of, like, the market driving the content, and why is it the studios? Is it the publishers saying these are the stories that are selling? Is that based on actual data? Are they making assumptions about, kind of maybe racial assumptions about what people want to see, what people want to read? And
probably,
if we can't blame them, which fucking I want to so hard, then it falls on us to go, well, I'm not going to go see that movie. I'm not going to go read that book. And
but we did both those things.
I know. This is why I'm frustrated and depressed. Like, we need to be more responsible consumers to go, but who's going to do that? And so then it's just a cycle of me becoming depressed about the state we live in. And that's why this movie bums me the fuck out more than Reminiscence.
Okay.
Welcome to our comedy podcast.
I hope you're all enjoying this. I just wanted to talk about story structure. Look, you are not wrong. And again, I take the view on this, as I do with so many of the movies, that it's like, okay, this was created for a variety of primarily economic reasons, and it's the product of a lot of different, not terribly ambitious creative visions. And I think that there's a lot of bleak reasons for why this pretty bland, soft-focused story about 8 really great can-do poor white guys got out there and did the thing. What upsets me is that, okay, taking all that for granted, the question you keep coming back to, who gives a shit? Why are you telling this story? That is my same question, but it's just that this movie, already coming into it, has kind of the weight of, like, it's 2023, we know some stuff now that we didn't know before about poverty, about race, about class, and we're making a movie about a bunch of white guys doing kind of the preppiest sport that there is, a sport that was literally invented by English prep schools and colleges in the 1700s. It is the most elite thing that there is to do, and the movie does not do any work to show us why we give a shit, to address those things, or to make us care.
Yeah, you've synthesized a little bit of my thoughts here, where it's like, it's using poverty, it's ignoring race, it's not interested in engaging with the historical, big fucking issue of Nazi Germany and their ideology, all for the purpose of a stocking stuffer.
Yes.
That is just morally reprehensible to me.
And look, and I don't expect every movie that happens to take place in the 30s or involve Germany in some way to unpack all of why Nazism was wrong and bad.
Sure.
I think, but it's like this movie isn't doing anything else, so it could be doing that.
Yeah. Like, but the stories about that haven't been told yet. So why are we choosing to tell this version of the story first when we really haven't gone into, the story of why Germany decided to vie for the 1936 Berlin Olympics, what they did to, show their new face to the world and try to, do this big magic trick and trying to convince us that we're actually cool dudes over here and nothing to worry about, nothing to see here. Aren't we all cheering for how we turn this country around? Hurrah!
Yeah.
No, and we're not even telling the important stories of standing in the face of that. We're just telling some stories about some good-looking white dudes rowing to win one race that they, lost all the others to.
And
sorry, backing away from the microphone for a minute.
We're telling a story about these good-looking white dudes, but also we're not even really being honest enough about how good-looking they were or how horny they were.
All right, let's go there. Let's go there for a second. That this will be a little less loaded of a question or of a topic.
Hopefully.
I am. This is another kind of just general problem I have with modern movies. I'm sick of watching good-looking people do stuff. Like, it's not that they can't exist, obviously.
Can I recommend a film called Challengers, which is literally nothing but good-looking people doing stuff that we both liked a lot?
It was my favorite film of last year.
Yeah.
The thing is, something you said earlier of like, we need to see the body transformation of these people. Well, guess what? We start this movie with beautiful people, and so we don't see a transformation because they're beautiful to begin with.
Yes.
And like, I don't know anything about Callum Turner. This is the first time I've ever seen him, but watching the trailer for The Hunger Games, there was just, this is my own thing, I'm not holding this against him. It's just a certain type of acting that exists right now for good-looking males in Hollywood, which is, i.e., every male in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Is like, we're thinking they're dramatic performances when all they're really doing 90% of the time is being stoic, not saying much, and maybe holding back a little bit of frustration. Like, I'm not going to be angry right now, but you could tell I'm brooding underneath this. And like, Callum Turner kind of embodies that for me, and that might be unfair of me to believe, but I just, it's so uninteresting to me.
That is, I think, a huge issue with this movie is, and I'm not trying to, I don't want to take anything away from Callum Turner, because a lot of this happens in the script too. Joe Rance, the main character, he's just a wet piece of cardboard. There is like nothing. Yeah. There is no character to him. Like, everything that we are supposed to know and assign to his character comes from us seeing him living in a burned out car. He does not have any personality. He is not particularly talkative. Joyce, the love interest in this movie, in an early scene, he is sitting studying. He's an engineering student. And she comes up and just starts chatting with him and is very bubbly and like, oh, you remember me? We went to school together, and didn't you have a crush on me back in the day? Say, do you still have a crush on me? Like, she throughout this movie, she isn't, like, to say that she's throwing herself at him is an understatement. She is yes. firing herself out of a cannon at him.
Yes.
And he is, like, barely reacting to her, one-word responses, not really giving her anything to go off of, and it's like, it's not clear what is there about this guy for her to like, and furthermore, what about this guy do we, the audience, like? What are we supposed to find compelling?
That's another just thing that generally makes me, kind of depressed about the modern state of movies. And man, this makes me sound like an old man on a soapbox, and I recognize that. I just want to acknowledge a little bit of self-awareness.
Podcasts are the new soapboxes for old men, by the way. I hate to tell you this.
Okay, all right. I'm in good company.
It's a big soapbox.
there's no work done in so many movies to make us, like, from a screenwriting perspective or from a filmmaking perspective, to care about the characters. We're just kind of like, well, I guess I care about this character because he's hot and he's the main character of the movie.
So the thing also is that Joe does not seem to care particularly about Joyce, who is throwing herself at him. But he also, like, we never really get a sense of why Joe even cares about rowing. He's like one of the least motivated sports movie protagonists I've ever seen, because his
motivation is he's poor.
Yeah. Well,
rowing gets him a job, and he's going to do the best job he can do, because he's poor, and that means he has dignity and pride and gratefulness in anything that's handed to him.
Yeah, it really, like, I think this movie honestly is using the shots of him eating beans from a can in a burned out car as a save the cat moment. As it, like,
yes.
Why do you like this guy? He's poor. That's why you like him. He had to eat beans from a can. And
he had to put newspaper in his shoe. He had to I don't want to get back into the poverty issue here for me, but
is that even effective? Putting newspaper in your shoe to cover up the hole in your shoe?
I mean, for a period of time, I would assume. Like, it's better than having your bare foot or your sock get stepped in a puddle.
And that's true. And listen, I'm maybe unemployed at the moment, but I've not got holes through the soles of my shoes yet. And I also don't have diamonds in the soles of my shoes, so it's a real, it's a feast or famine thing. But I don't know how effective a newspaper is going to be in there. I feel like I've seen guys do that in multiple movies. This is not the point. He only takes the job as a rower. He only tries to be a rower because there is a part-time job attached to it. And then, so, like, we go from that to all these montages of him and the team rowing and rowing and rowing, and finally, miraculously, he's one of the 8 who makes the cut out of this whole crowd of guys. And so then he's on the team, but the team's together celebrating and carousing, and he leaves early. He splits from hanging out with them to go find Joyce, and he throws a pebble at her window to get her to come hang out with him. And they're out rowing around in a rowboat on the lake, and she asks him, "Do you like rowing?" And his response is, "I'm getting a job out of it in a room, so I guess."
Okay, well, can we zoom in on this date scene for a second? Like,
yeah,
they're rowing on this lake. For one thing, like, why choose the one activity that you do day in and day out that's supposedly breaking your body? And then also, from a Joyce's perspective here, the way this date is starting for us, the audience, is him explaining to her how to hold a oar, how to row a boat, things that she hasn't asked for. She's, like, confused as to why they're out here doing this thing. And I'm like, what kind of fucking romantic date is this? Where you just go and have someone explain to you how to do something.
This is the first time in any of their scenes together that he has shown any indication that he actually likes her at all and finds her anything other than a bothersome annoyance. And it is just so he can, mansplain to her how to row.
Look, like, you've seen how many times in movies where, like, the man is showing the woman how to play billiards, right? And he, like, is, curled up right behind her, and they're leaning forward together in a very evocative imagery, and they're sliding the pool cue through their hands in a very phallic manner. And like you've seen that 100 times. Can you imagine what Luca would do with this, where it's like, rowing inherently has a very sexual sort of vibe to it. And the way this is shot is like he's at the far end of the boat just instructing her how to do it. There's no, like, hold it like this, hand cupping the other hand, and slowly they're moving, back and forth. And, like, no, he's just like, okay, and then the reason that didn't work is because you gotta turn your wrist when you do this. And it's like, what the fuck kind of date is this?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I guess it is very realistic that an engineering student wouldn't really be able to turn this date into a sexy moment rather than a teaching moment.
But why, if she's the horny one, why wouldn't she do it?
This is the thing. Another reason that this movie should have been hornier is because it would have it would have explained why Joyce is throwing herself at this guy. Like, if the movie made more of a thing of, like, they used to be scrawny, now they're totally shredded, it's like, yeah, of course she keeps coming around and, like, flirting with him and, like, hey, do you remember I had a crush on me? Do you still have a crush on me? Because we went to school together when we were kids. Like, that would make more sense if he was really hot, and then that's part of a greater plot line of, like, yeah, this is how my life has changed since I started rowing the boat. Now girls want to talk to me.
Yeah. Let's see her, with her classmates or her roommates, like, lounging out on the docks, watching all the rowers, and, like, their pastime activity is just, like, gushing over the hot bods that are rowing on the lake at the school. Like, give me that. Let me get the female gaze a little bit here.
God, I know. And well, just to touch on this again, also let's get some male gaze in there, because there's one scene where he is like, the boys are all training together, and they're he's doing sit-ups when one of the other boys from the boat is, like, holding his toes, and he keeps doing sit-ups, and his face keeps getting closer and closer to his friend's face who's holding his toes in place. And this is early enough on in the movie that I didn't realize how poorly I was going to be treated as an audience member, but I'm thinking, like, oh, are they making eyes at each other? Okay, are some of the boys in the boat gay for each other? I love this. Nope. Yes, let's have that. No. They like rowing, and they like talking to girls at dance halls. Yeah. And then some of the girls indicate that they want to go someplace quiet with the boys, but we don't get to see that, because that wouldn't be proper.
Because this plays very much into the theme we talked about in our Tarzan episode of the genre of make your dad proud movies.
Oh, God. And your dad would be very disappointed if he knew that you were having sex, or at least if it's one thing if he knows it, it's another thing if he sees it happening, even in a PG-13 fashion.
I kind of want, I don't know if this is backtracking exactly, but you talked about the montages, and I want to just touch on something real quick and go into a big thing I have to unveil on this show.
We were talking about being more horny, and now we've gotten there.
Well, okay, I want to talk about the montage. We get our first montage 20 minutes into this movie, and It's like I have no context at this point for a montage. Like, montages are to, show a series of things in succession of progression, right? Like, you see them getting better at something, but you have to start from the place of, like, why do they have to get better? What is it they have to go through? And then the montage shows us what they go through. But going into the first montage, 20 minutes into a movie for your first montage is just, like, insane to me. Like, those are reserved to get you through the second act. Like,
yes,
the desert of that second act.
Well, don't worry though. They have lots of montages in the second act too. They just once you uncork the montage spigot in this movie, it doesn't really get plugged up again until the end.
The 2 points I have for this is, like, I have no context as to, like, why rowing is hard. Like, I know on a personal level, and, like, I can see with my eyes generally, like, I can't do that. I wouldn't be able to do that. But, like, the movie doesn't give me any reason as to, like, these already fucking chiseled bodies, why is it hard for them? What is it about rowing that makes this such a Herculean feat? And so then, likewise, right after this montage, as you talked about, when the boys are getting picked, like, why these dopes? Why are these idiots getting picked for the boat? Who the fuck are they? What did they have to go through? What was their progression through this montage? This is all touching on shit we've already talked about. But, like, to be 20 minutes into the movie and having gone through all of that and none of those answers is just, like, a complete failure on a filmmaking level. And this I want to use to transition into talking about George Clooney as a director. Truman, I'm going to take one of your phrases.
Okay.
I have a unified theory.
Oh, boy. Okay, I have a unified theory about the Cloon dog as well. This is great. Okay. We both have theories. But give me yours first.
Maybe we have the same one. Here's my theory about George Clooney as a director.
Yeah.
He sucks, and he knows it.
Oh, wow. This podcast has gone harder on George Clooney, specifically you, than anybody else. Money Monster, you're taking him down for his dancing. Now you're saying he can't even direct. Boy.
okay, truthfully, I mean, he's not a good director. I have evidence to back that up. But I think even what we discussed about in Money Monster of just like, he's just phoning it in. I think he's kind of lazy. And I think he knows it, and he knows as a professional, he's a professional, I will give him that, and he knows the image he's created for himself. He knows the bare minimum he has to give to get something over, right? But he doesn't, there's no passion behind it, and there's nothing interesting at all about any choice he makes, both acting or directing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I rise in defense of George Clooney, the actor. I enjoy his performances a lot. He is incredibly charismatic on screen, even when he's kind of phoning it in. I still just like it. Okay, maybe I'm just responding to a really good-looking guy. I like watching good-looking people doing stuff.
I will give the caveat. I think he's a fantastic personality. I think he's got charisma out the wazoo. I really enjoy him. I think there's a certain like crafted personality of the self-deprecating nature, the prankster, that like you can never really be mad at him. Like, he knows that he does shit sometimes, and he's going to be the first to admit it, and therefore it's easier to overlook his laziness at times.
I think it is possible to be mad at him based on the tenor of this conversation, but
yeah.
Okay, you know what? I was bristling at first when you said that, but upon reflection, I think I will grant you that he's not a good director. You watched Race, and you read the book The Boys in the Boat. You did all of this research and study. I too did some research. I watched the movie Leatherheads, which is George Clooney's other old-timey sports movie from 2008, which is about the early days of the NFL. And because, watching The Boys in the Boat, I was thinking, like, this feels this feels Leatherheadsy, just in like the color palette and everything like that. And so I went.
Is he asking, what if the Leatherheads were Monuments Men?
Yeah, it really does seem like I mean, and that seems to be what motivates George Clooney to make movies now. It's like, what's a story from a time period when everything was kind of sepia-toned? What stories can I tell about dudes in that time period? And look, I put on Leatherheads, and I think that Leatherheads is marginally better than this movie, because the first 30 minutes of Leatherheads is entertaining. It's a real good time. It is a lot of just, it's, old-timey football antics. It's a little bit of John Krasinski being an all-star college football player, and then it's a lot of George Clooney, who is starring in the movie as well as directing it, being kind of the point man for this real rundown, shitty NFL team, because the NFL was like just like, it had no money and nobody gave a shit about it at the time. It's a lot of heavily slapstick kind of live action cartoon type stuff of people running around, and he's getting tackled, and he's drinking liquor on the sidelines, and there's like a little kid who's their ball boy smoking a cigarette, and he's got, fun banter with people, and the camera's zooming around in fun ways, and it's like, it's clearly not a good movie, but it's at least entertaining. But then as Leatherheads proceeds into the uncharted waters of the second act, and this love story with Renee Zellweger, and like a love triangle with him and John Krasinski and Zellweger, and some weird B plot about a newspaper scandal, the movie just completely loses its way. There's like 50 minutes of movie where there is no football happening whatsoever. There's completely like unrelated Keystone Cops chase sequences where they're disguising themselves as cops and jumping out windows. There's a barroom brawl with 30 minutes left in the movie. They start a bar fight for no reason. And so I think that tracks with what you're saying, is that I think that George Clooney likes vibes. He likes creating a vibe. He likes cutting to a montage. He likes shooting a montage. He likes, he likes creating images and vibes, but he doesn't seem to have the follow through to actually get the whole movie to land as an intact thing.
Talents? Is that the word you're searching for there?
I mean, I don't want to. I mean, it seems reductive to just say he's bad at it, but it's like
he is. Okay, let me pull out some evidence for you. Okay,
I've seen Leatherheads. I don't need any more compelling evidence than Leatherheads.
Well, okay, I want to point to two films that people always point to when talking about him as a director and being like, oh, but George Clooney. Confessions of a Dangerous Mind and Good Night, Good Luck, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Confessions of a Dangerous Mind falls under that. Actually, it was pretty good. I remember liking that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if people rewatch that, it's not a bad movie. It's a messy fucking movie.
Yes.
And the thing that I think distracts people is the cinematography of that.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to point to in terms of vibes, in terms of the look of his films, in terms of the editing of his films, is he seems to just take the style of the previous director he worked with and applies it to his own work. So you've got this kind of weird, almost black and white, the noirish looking cinematography and color palette for Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. Well, that was in 2002, and it comes right after he works on Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Perfect, yeah.
He does Good Night and Good Luck. Well, that black and white film set also during this period of time. And that comes right after he works with Steven Soderbergh on The Good German, a black and white World War II movie.
Gotcha.
So, and then, I think the vibes of Leatherheads also goes back to just that wacky Hal Caesar tone of the Coen brothers.
I mean, because it certainly also, like, Leatherheads really does pride itself on trying to create a 1920s vibe. Like, it opens with the 1920s Universal logo or whatever at the beginning, and like there's lots of, I mean, the whole thing has got like a ragtime Randy Newman score. Honestly, the score for Leatherheads slaps. It's pretty good. It's Randy Newman, but there's so many montages in that movie, and especially in the opening credits, that are all like camera panning over old-timey black and white photos of the characters, honestly either akin to the opening credits for Cheers or the montage in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid where they're going to New York and then Bolivia. He seems to take a lot of joy in, like, replicating the era and getting really deep into it through editing and those kind of choices.
Sure, but to me, when I look at his films, they're just like someone applying a Instagram filter. Let me put on the Coen brothers Instagram filter here.
Yes.
Granted, I don't think for this particular movie, Boys in the Boat, he's aping a specific director or style of a director. But like when I look at this movie, some of the stuff I saw on Letterboxd and other places, the reviews of this were hailing, well, it's beautiful to look at, and I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think it is
beautiful.
No, I don't. It's putting that 1930s Depression era filter on it without any real like intention of how you're using that to tell your story. It's just like, this is what the 1930s looked like, as 30, 40, 50 years of cinema has told me.
I gotta say, during the first 30 minutes of the movie, the second or third rowing montage, I'm thinking like, well, this movie kind of sucks, but at least rowing is kind of cool and pretty to look at. I mean, at least it's got that going for it. And then, about halfway through the movie, at which point we're on like rowing montage 20, I'm starting to think, you know what? Actually, fuck rowing. I hate rowing. This movie has made me hate the visual aesthetics of rowing. You burned me out on it, Clooney. It's too much.
Well, the thing is, like, okay, I got two more notes about this, which is, one, it's saying a lot that David Fincher in The Social Network did more with a 30-second rowing scene than this entire fucking movie does.
Well, okay, but again, talk about zooming in. I'll watch 30 seconds of rowing. I'll watch, I think, because I watched that ahead of this, I think it's like a minute and 38 seconds. That's the amount of rowing that I think I'm queued up for and I'm ready for, with no other character development or anything else to hang on to.
Okay, and then hold on to your butt, because we're going back into the Third Reich here.
Words you never want to hear.
I know. The most interesting shots in this film are during the final race at the Olympics. And the shots in question are the only ones in the movie that put me in the boat, make me feel what the rowers feel like, pushing their bodies to the limits, screaming, instructions at each other, really getting the intensity of those 6 minutes that it took them to get over the finish line.
Yeah.
Those shots are 100% moment to moment, second to second replicated from Leni Riefenstahl's documentary.
So you're saying George Clooney didn't just plagiarize from a female director, he plagiarized from a female Nazi-aligned director.
That's correct. Yes. The most interesting part of the visual part of this movie comes from a Nazi. Listen, I don't have any sympathy for Leni Riefenstahl either. I don't have any problem calling her a Nazi. I don't care if she was affiliated or not. She was instrumental in bringing the Nazi thing to the world stage, so, she's a fucking Nazi.
Yeah, you don't gotta hand it to her under any circumstances. A good filmmaker, but not like a good person.
Innovative filmmaker, for sure, but an effective one, but controversial and a Nazi. Yes.
Okay, so are you suggesting then that the most recent director who George Clooney worked with before this movie was Leni Riefenstahl? Is she still alive? Was he in Argentina for some reason?
She died in 2003. But, I don't know, that's the level of lack of creativity that he's bringing to this, is if your most interesting thing in this film is shots that were created 70 years ago by a Nazi, fucking hang your hat up. Why are you making this movie?
I mean, look, I would say that in terms of its directing, this movie has less of the, I don't know, you alluded to this with Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, a movie that I remember enjoying, but also the main things that I remember from it are Sam Rockwell is fun, and it was really kinetic in the way it was directed. There was lots of kind of wacky stuff going on and fun camera moves and things like that that get me, because I'm a big dumb idiot and I just like it when a camera moves around in a funny way, I guess. But so this movie has none of that character or anything to it, and it doesn't have any of the character that Leatherheads at least starts out with, or any of the kind of clarity of purpose that movie begins with. I would say that this movie is less sloppy than any of his other movies, because Leatherheads, it gets sloppy and it ends incredibly sloppy. There must have been gigantic holes blown in that script during production, because it seems like a lot of stuff got stitched up very messily, and scenes that we cut away from at weird times, and the ending is completely incomprehensible. So this movie, for all of its faults, it is the most buttoned up and locked down of his movies, in that it is mostly comprehensible, and but that buttoned upness, that safety of it, makes it just feel like this completely half-assed, underdone thing.
Yeah. That is, I think you've said it on a previous episode, one of the biggest crimes a film can do is be, mid, be boring, I would rather have a mess than this, where it's just because this isn't a movie. It looks like a movie, it sounds like a movie, but it's really just a series of moving images in front of your eyes that, if you really broke it down, which we've been doing for 2 hours now, there's not a movie here. It's just a progression of sequences leading to a foregone conclusion that, in a vacuum, or taken as a whole, I guess, that was a story. You walk out of the theater, seeing it on Christmas Day to avoid, political conversations with your family, and you're not paying attention to the movie, because all that's going through your head is thank God I don't have to fucking talk to Uncle Joe for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, and then but then Uncle Joe, with all of his hot political takes, he sees all the swastikas and he starts elbowing you in the theater and going I actually agree with a lot of the theoretical underpinnings of that ideology. Hey, let's talk about it in the theater. This movie is pretty much just lights and colors, and frankly, it's not even that many colors.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. This is just a question about the story. And, at the beginning of this film, when they're putting together the team, right, is the intention that they're putting together a team for the Olympics, or are they just putting the rowing team together for the next year to compete in Poughkeepsie, to compete with the University of California, which really isn't explored in this, but it's explored in the book. At what point does the Olympics become the thing here?
They basically start talking about the Olympics around the halfway point of the movie after they've done the second regatta. The whole thing is, this is the JV rowing team, which is supposed to just be, the kind of feeder organization for the varsity team, but then the coaches who initially have underestimated these guys are shocked to find out that actually this group of rowers is performing better than the varsity team. They are winning more matches than the varsity team, and then they ultimately decide, once the Olympics are on the table, which is about, 5 minutes after the second regatta that they go to in New York, they decide, hey, let's send these guys as our Olympic submission instead of the varsity team. However, there are all these scenes of the coaches looking at race statistics after the fact, or with their roster, their blackboard of who's in the boat and what positions, and they're talking about oh my God, these guys are the most amazing rowers. They're the strongest group we've ever had. But again, no work done to explain what makes them that. Why are they that? Yeah.
And to me the confusing nature of why are they so gung-ho about putting this team together at the forefront? If it's just for putting together the varsity team, that's one thing, but if they're putting the team together, the importance that this film wants to kind of play with at the beginning is they need to put together the best team ever because they are aiming for the Olympics this year.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen. And by the time the Olympics is kind of introduced, it's not even really overt. And for, again, being a film about the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, that kind of needs to be your thing. It has to, I don't know, you can't just kind of soft shoe it to the finish line here. If this is going to be an Olympic movie, unless the story is about them falling ass backwards into the Olympics, your movie has to be Olympics from frame one, I kind of feel like.
Yeah. I mean, I think the movie is instead trying to be a movie about Joe Rance at times in his inspirational story, so it's not really about the Olympics until it's about what the Olympics mean to him. But then again, the movie doesn't really put any emphasis on who Joe is or what his deal is.
Can we transition to talking about inspiration?
Inspiration? Oh God, this is okay. I suppose you have something to go with on inspiration.
Well, okay, two things in particular. They're both kind of tropes. One is I want to talk about the wisdom giver, the guy who's building the boat and who Joe Rance helps out with.
Yeah, the team has an in-house boat builder who builds them a special boat, and Joe hangs out with him, and this guy becomes a Yoda-type father figure to him.
I hate this type of character. And I won't reopen this whole wound again, but he asks Joe to help him, and Joe's just happy to have something to do because guess what? You remember? He's poor and lives in a shanty. So he doesn't mind having rowed all day and broken his body and then going and sweeping up and scraping this boat, and shaving it to, perfection with this guy because this guy's giving him inspiration.
I think what the guy is actually offering him is a sense of belonging, and that is what Joe craves. And the movie is, I think, trying to make that Joe's great arc, and the movie wants us to think that yes, the thing that Joe likes about rowing is being a part of something because he's never been a part of something before, and so this guy offering to let him clean up around the shop sometimes, and Joe immediately grabs a broom and starts doing it, is Joe is so desperate for belonging. That's, I think, the movie's intent that it does not execute on.
Then let's use that to kind of talk about the father scene.
Oh God. There's a scene as the team is doing better and better, Joe winds up seeing his dad outside of a coffee shop that he's in with Joyce when he's barely participating in a conversation with her, and he goes out and talks to his dad, who I guess had left his dad had abandoned him a few years ago to go find work in California, and he goes out and talks to his dad, and it turns out his dad has been back from California for a few years and just never told him, and his dad is basically like, yep, I don't like you, and my wife doesn't like you, and you don't owe me anything, and I don't owe you anything, so fuck off. I don't think it matters that you row a boat. And then that is the reason that Joe is sad for the next 20 minutes and tries to punch one of his friends when he calls him Hobo Joe.
Yeah. Well, but if you're like aiming for that sense of belonging, like that is a through line that should be a little more explicit, I think. I mean,
well, they beat it over the. It's pretty fucking explicit when they beat you over the head with it in that one scene. So you got that going for you.
Yeah. So this is where like. This is I haven't spoken these words yet on this episode. I'm very proud that I got 2 hours into it without it. But like, this is boomer book club bullshit. Where that's what this book is written for, first and foremost. Like, they knew they would have a New York Times bestseller because they could book club the shit out of this.
Sure.
And this is a scene where, you know, the boomer book clubbers can go, well, yeah, there's much more context of this in the book, but I'm, you know, they can point at the screen, Leo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood style, going, that's the scene in the book from when his father talks to him and they see each other. Like, there's a whole story there that would be interesting to see on screen. Like, his father did abandon him, but like, it was brutal. Like, his father told him, you can't, your stepmother doesn't like you and doesn't want you around here anymore because you're one more mouth to feed in this horrible depression that we're in. So, like, get out of here. And then they decide to move away to California and not tell him. And so this moment when the father comes into the movie is like, after all of that, they haven't seen each other since that shit has happened. And like, that's some pretty important context to give this moment weight that is not there at all. It's just like, oh, he sees his dad in the street.
And you know,
it's not good.
This is another zoom in, zoom out case where it's like, then maybe zoom your movie out far enough that you start with this happening to him early on, and this is a formative experience for Joe, which then it gives weight and depth and guidance to stuff he does later on in the movie. It's like George Clooney zoomed this movie to the perfect focal length to not be interesting, to exclude a bunch of interesting stuff, and then the stuff that he does include, he robs of any context that would make it better, or any depth that would allow you to build a connection to the characters. It's a very boring ship in a very boring bottle.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Or a boat.
A boat in a bottle. Boys in a Boat in a Bottle. That's a movie I would watch.
That's
hosted by Jerry Seinfeld.
That's a vocal exercise I would do before going on stage.
The other part of inspirational stuff I wanted to talk about is another trope of the sports genre, which is the inspirational coach speeches.
Oh God, yeah. Let's talk about this, because again, the role of the coach, whose name I don't remember and do not care to remember, the coach has put together this team, the coach has put together this team, and he and the assistant coach are constantly marveling at how well they're doing, but the coach tends to be putting the team down a lot, or he'll give them these really, like, you know, curt speeches about, like, let's try not to flip the boat over, just try not to come in last, or something like that, and yet they keep on getting better.
Yeah, and then the coxswain also has this inspirational speech to the boys that is just like, you know, I think Lauren had mentioned it in our Poseidon episode, where it's like, once you parody this, you can't really go back to the authentic thing anymore.
Yeah.
Like, after John Belushi gave the inspirational speech in Animal House, like, we should have been done with them.
Yes.
Like, now I find them so... this plays a little bit into like my anti-sports mentality thing that I have, that I should probably go to therapy for. Like, I cannot abide like this, the tone, the sentiments that are like yelled at, and the rousing nature of these locker room speeches, like there's just a kind of like fuck you attitude that it pulls out of me, and I should probably explore that a little bit personally, but it bothers me to a big degree in almost every sports movie I watch, except for maybe Dodgeball.
Well, yeah, Dodgeball, which is also a very serious, straight-laced award bait movie. I completely agree, because once more, as I've said about 1,000 times, so much of this movie is people marveling at how good the boys in the boat are at rowing without any kind of clarity or explanation on what it is that's been making them good. But so you're kind of left to assume, well, what has gotten these boys in line and made them good must be their coaching by, Coach Gruffy McGee, who is always telling them how much they suck, and by the coxswain. And the coxswain is the guy who sits at the front of the boat and yells through a megaphone strapped to his face for them to row and to keep them basically on track with their rowing. And so there's a scene kind of early on where it's like the coach and his assistant are like, the guys are all strong rowers, but I don't know if they're coordinated well enough. Let's swap in a different coxswain. So they bring this kid in to be the coxswain who's really heckling them when they row to like get them mad and angry, and that's making them row faster. So it's just basically what this movie suggests, in the absence of anything else, is that if you take a bunch of young men and you withhold your approval from them and you yell at them a lot and belittle them, it will make them super strong. And I don't love that message. That doesn't really resonate with me.
Yeah.
And it's not...
It's why I quit sports.
Yeah, like it's just not terribly inspirational. Like, I think it's inspirational if it's like, yeah, these guys built relationships with each other that allowed them to be good at this. But what the movie seems to suggest is it's like, no, this guy was mean enough to them, and their friend yelled at them enough that they were good at this. Which that doesn't look good on screen, for one thing, and it's also kind of a shit message.
Yes, and maybe yeah, it's probably triggering something in me, something I need to unwrap and let go of in my life. I had I played sports a lot as a kid, actually, and I was in basketball and had a coach. There's one game where they, and I was a fat little kid and they never wanted to put me in, and that sucked. But instead of my participation trophy, they threw me in there, and like I managed to get the ball away from someone and toss it to one of our teammates, and like they scored a point, and in the process I tripped over something and like landed square on my knee, and it hurt, and they pulled me out, and the coach was like, "I'll get over it. I played an entire game of high school football with a broken collarbone." And I'm just like, motherfucker, I just hurt my knee. Like, get the fuck off me.
But yeah, also
I don't give a shit about your goddamn broken collarbone. I'm in middle school, for fuck's sake. I'm 12 years old.
It's middle school basketball, and also playing an entire sporting event with a serious injury is not aspirational. It's not. It's like that same thing when conservative people will like point at kids today and say like, these kids could never storm Normandy at D-Day, and it's like, yeah, I mean,
do you want them to?
Yeah, like that's not a rubric for success, having to run into machine gun fire. Society is improved if it means that people don't have to regularly like run in front of machine guns. That's a good thing. It's a good thing that you don't have to win a football game with your collar broken. And this movie, makes a lot of points about just like these guys really suffered. They really, not only were they poor, and not only were they half-starved at times, but they were also being verbally abused by their coach, and that made them great. That adversity made them great, therefore adversity is good.
But you know what, Truman? That coach, he might have been tough, but he was fair.
Was he?
I think so. I think that's exactly what this sort of movie wants us to think. Like, you want that coach that's gonna get you to where you need to be, but like you're gonna be okay with him if you like put the work in. That is a trope of the sports movie. That's a trope of this movie.
No, you know what? No, Landon, I disagree. I don't think the
Okay.
coach is fair. Let me tell you, because they're at one
Okay.
of their games after the whole Hobo Joe moment. Joe is a big sad boy about this. He doesn't know
Yeah.
that Landon's middle school basketball coach played an entire football game with his collarbone broken, so he doesn't have the strength to go on. But he's really mad. This is the only time in the movie where there appears to be any conflict at all, because Joe is so mad about stuff that he's not rowing very well, and he and the other crew members are blaming themselves or blaming each other for it. It would be great if we actually saw this playing out with dialogue, but no, it's just a montage with discordant tones playing in the background and lots of him silently hollering and saying it's not his fault. So he gets mad at the coach. He quits the team. He then has a talk with the boat builder Yoda guy, which convinces him that he wants to go back. He goes back to the coach. But when he mouths off to the coach, and the coach tells him to take a hike, the coach points to this alternate, this other guy with them who's waiting as the understudy, and is like, he's gonna row in your place, and we get a shot of that kid. And then the next day, Joe goes back to the coach and tells him no, I want to be back on the team. Okay, why do you want to row? And Joe basically goes he basically just says, I've put so much into this team already, I've got to see it through. So again, we still don't know why he likes rowing. It seems to be sunk cost
Yes.
fallacy all the way. But argument against fairness, the coach immediately reinstates Joe to the team, and we never see what happens to this dude who briefly thought he had his big break to row in the Olympics and shit.
Right.
The coach the coach kicks this poor kid to the curb simply because the asshole who quit the team and fucked everything up said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I want to come back." That's not fair. It's not fair at all, man. Maybe that other guy was poor too. Where's his story? Maybe he eats beans out of a can.
Truman. Thank you for all that, because you simultaneously proved 2 points of mine at once.
Okay.
Yes, I agree with you. In reality, that is not fair at all. But this movie and why we, this type of movie can exist because we don't examine this shit closer is by us going, well, Joe's the main character, though. He needs to be on the rowing team. And him coming forward and saying, you know what, I was wrong, I want to be on the team, and the coach reinstating him, is the movie saying this character is tough but fair. In reality, he's not. And that's the sort of shit we got to go, you know what? No. This behavior is bullshit. Why are we glorifying this? What you just described is absolutely true, and stuff that happens all of the time in sports.
And I don't know. Also, I think this also bleeds into the fundraising montage, which is just such BS. They qualify for the Olympics, and then the Olympic committee guy tells them, "We don't have the funds to send you to the Olympics, and if you can't come up with $5,000,
is it 5,000? I thought, 5,000 initially, and then they come up 300 short, right?
Yes, it's $5,000 that they need, and the Olympic Committee can't afford it because I guess the Great Depression is a thing, even though every one of these boat races is the most lavish cotillion type event you've ever seen. But so there's this, it's if you can't come up with the money in exactly 1 week, then we're going to send one of these other teams who you beat to the Olympics instead. So there's this whole thing, this whole montage of the coach going on the radio and talking about how we need to raise the money, and the boys are doing they're out there collecting nickels, and Joyce and all the other girls are running a fundraising drive, and eventually, when they only have 4 hours left before the completely immovable deadline to have $5,000, the coach from one of their rival schools writes a check for $300 to get him over the line. This whole sequence happens that's probably, I don't know, longer than it should be. 5-10 minutes of screen time.
Kind of like this episode.
Yeah, exactly, but far less angry or tiresome. But this whole sequence is going on, but it's just movie, we know they're going to go to the Olympics. Okay, so we know they're getting there. Maybe this actually happened and they had to fundraise, but it's and maybe it's interesting that one of their rivals help them out with the funds, but it's you don't need to make 10 minutes of the movie about this, because everyone sitting in the theater knows that the 1936 Olympic team rowing winners actually went to the Olympics. And it's not it's not like a Columbo thing where it's it's exciting to see how they get to the end point. It's no, they're clearly going to fundraise and just get the money together. It's there's not a
Yeah.
unique or fun or interesting way this is going to play out. And I think that same thing is at play with the whole Joe being a sad boy and very briefly leaving the rowing team thing, where it's like, well, we know he's going to be there, and you don't give us an interesting dramatic heft to this scene. It's just like, oh, he's doing it because there has to be a moment in the movie where the hero doubts or doesn't want to accept the call to greatness because I read that in a Sid Field book. Like, yeah.
So this late in the episode, I'm not going to go into any great depth about this, but I will just point listeners to our Hope Springs episode in talking about, the audience for this type of movie just wanting, familiar story beats and a positive note they can go out on. And then I'd also point to our Butler episode of like the weird nature of adhering to reality, like a real story, real people, and what that kind of binds you to, especially when those real people are also in a book that was a blockbuster, bestseller, and like you have to hit the beats, and even if the beats aren't, dramatically satisfying in a movie, how do you change them without like having a completely different vision for the film? We go into much greater detail on both of those things in those episodes, and both of those things are at play here as well.
Yeah. That's true.
That's a great review of this movie. That
is the review. I mean, I don't know. Look, we need to talk a little bit, though. I mean, about this framing device, this framing story, because Okay, so as we've alluded to, this movie starts with a very old man sitting on a dock watching a bunch of guys rowing. That is actually our first rowing montage that already goes on for too long. It's just the opening credits. He's watching this bunch of college rowers who he seems to be coaching on a river, and then
Is he coaching them? I think he's just watching them.
Maybe he's just watching them. Okay, but then there's also a little kid in a rowing-type boat who is, we later learn, his grandson.
Yep.
And so the kid is rowing along, and then this speedboat full of drunk party people speeds by, and the wake starts disturbing the boat that the little kid is in, and he's like, whoa, and then we just kind of
like 80s synth music is playing or like Motley Crue sort of songs are playing as they speed by. So like, wait a minute, I thought The Boys in the Boat was about World War II era, Depression era shit. Why am I hearing, the Eurythmics coming out of this?
Like,
oh, it's him. He's old. We're going to go back in time and listen to this story.
Yes, exactly. One of the teenagers in the boat throws a can of new Coke at him as they go by, and and a Rubik's Cube also. Yeah. And as they go around the bend, one of the kids screams out, "Avoid the Noid." But yeah, so he's sitting there, and the wake from this boat is messing with his grandson's rowing, and we just kind of push close on his face watching this, and then he thinks about the entire events of the movie, and then they win in Berlin, yay, and then we almost like Saving Private Ryan. Speaking of George Clooney, just going back to other movies he's seen, we go from Joe's triumphant face after winning the gold to then the old man sitting at the dock, and we get a reverse shot back to the water, and his grandson, his boat has basically been beached up against the muddy bank of the river, like he's almost capsized. So what this suggests is that he's been sitting there watching his grandson almost drown, just thinking about the entirety of him being on the rowing team in the 30s. That gives him more characterization than anything else in the movie, that it's like, yes, this man is so stuck in the past that he would almost let his own progeny drown just so he can relive his glory days one more time.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't know. This movie, this episode, everything has exhausted me. I don't know that I have anything more to add to this conversation right now.
Yeah, maybe we didn't even have that much in the first place. Do we want to talk about why this movie was forgotten so that we in turn can forget it?
Yes. Yeah, I unfortunately don't think I will be able to, but
oh no.
Why do you think this movie was forgotten?
I think this movie was forgotten This movie's forgotten because it's as you said, it's not really a movie. Nobody really is struggling. Nobody overcomes anything. There is not conflict in this film. It looks like it's hard to row the boat, but they are always good at it. The girl always likes him, always wants him. There's one scene where they're together in her room for the first time, and he finds a letter on her desk, and for a second I'm thinking, like, oh, is this a letter from another guy? Is there going to be some kind of, like, issue or difficulty in their relationship? No, it turns out it's a love letter he wrote her when they were classmates in 4th grade, and she's been treasuring it forever because she's always been obsessed with him. Like, just...
Don't even remember that scene.
Yeah, good. Delete it from your brain. Like, just... At every step of the way, things just work, and there's no need to really struggle or overcome, and they get through and everything is great, which is not the sort of movie that you remember, because that's not how memorable stories work. You don't just look at a story where good things happen to people all the time and everything works, and that's ultimately what this Depression-era movie partially set in Nazi Germany is about, and seems kind of like a miss. I think also corollary to that, I think the other reason is that although rowing was very popular in 1936, nobody in 2023 gives a shit about rowing. It's just not like a big deal sport now, and this movie does none of the groundwork necessary to make you care about rowing. So,
yeah, all good points.
That's me. Why do you think?
Okay. Well, I had written an essay.
Oh, God. As we move into hour 3.
No, because of that, I'm not going to read it. But let me just skim through parts of it.
Get ready for a lot of profanity, I guess.
All right, let's see. This is not a movie. This is not a story. It's not doing anything. This is a pod person of a movie.
Oh. But we're
don't
pod
listen
people.
to it. You think it looks good, but there are no thoughts behind any of the shot choice, the color palettes. This is just a picture from the 1930s fucking image generator.
The color palette is the reason people forgot it. Audiences walked out of there like, it's strange. The color palette was so muted. I can't hold this in my mind. Where have I been?
All right, what else do we got here? Okay, there's no conflict, nothing's solved. You think there is, but there isn't. Type of movie you see with your family on Christmas. Let's see here. You don't pay attention to this movie. This is a movie that makes you sleep with your eyes open. Images flicker across the screen, but it's nothing more than a poltergeist. What else we got here? I'm almost
starting to think that rather than reading the essay, you just wanted to do a bunch of burns, making it sound like you're speed reading them.
Let's see. Okay. In conclusion.
Okay.
This is nothing. These are the clothes the Emperor is wearing.
Wow. Oh my God. Your review is honestly pretty similar to a lot of the critical comments. I mean, the New York Times called this movie as subtle as a bonk on the nose, and they say we never quite get an insight into how these undergrads melded into a winning team. I've never seen a movie with this much applause. The extras must have been as winded as the athletes. The boys in the boat get stuck in the shallow end of the sports movie pool. George Clooney's rowing drama fails to make waves. A lot of... I'm just saying we're not alone in feeling this way.
Okay, good. Well, then, should we send this back to modern memory or leave it forgotten? Truman?
Yes, Landon, let's remember it and treasure it forever. No. Let's forget it. Let's use it as kindling to start a fire. I don't know why. Probably shouldn't do that on a spaceship, but I said it.
Yeah, or a movie about Nazis, but okay.
No. Look, don't burn books unless that book is the screenplay of The Boys in the Boat, the novelization of the movie The Boys in the Boat.
All right. All right. Essay number 2. Leave this forgotten for fucking sure. Let's put George Clooney in director jail and maybe not ever let him out again.
But let's put him on work release for acting though. I'm happy to look at the man. Leatherhead's the parts of Leatherheads that work do so off of George Clooney's charisma. Okay. He completely blows John Krasinski out of the water in that movie.
that movie was also 18 years ago. So, like...
That movie was 15 years ago, Landon. It came out in 2008, the same year as The Rocker. Both John Krasinski went one way, and Rainn Wilson went the other way, and they both made kind of bad movies.
Listen, I got no problem with George Clooney as an actor if he's gonna fucking try something. I can't abide laziness, and this just feels like, well, you know what? This year I need to, maintain my reputation as a Hollywood star by acting in a movie. And if I'm not going to do that, then I need to produce 3 films. And if I'm not going to do that, I need to direct something. And there's nothing. God, there's nothing to this movie. it's so fucking put me in such a bad place. I'm so sorry, everyone, that you have to listen to this, our second to last episode of the season. I'm just so depressed. I hate this movie so fucking much.
The most depressing thing that can happen to Landon is someone trying to inspire him. Oof, just don't you dare try and inspire this guy. Or if you're going to try and inspire him, at least put your whole ass into it.
It's using this sort of bullshit to try to inspire me. This movie hits on the same triggering button for me, and I realize I'm maybe overreacting to this film.
Possibly.
But it lights the fire in me the same way the fucking Blind Side does. And I just think these are just really, really doing damage to, not whatever. I don't even want to make the argument anymore. But this is the end of the episode. I am so sorry I brought this energy to the last moments of the show. Fuck.
I feel like we keep making episodes like this, and then afterwards we always say, like, we can't let that happen again, and then we just keep coming out there and do it. We need to both not get so fussed about movies. or rather, movies need to start getting better so they don't make us do this. Yeah,
that would be preferable.
It's the movie's fault. It's not on us. We're great.
A little bit of both. I'll you know what? I got to accept my part in this, and you know what? Listen, Hollywood, I'll do my part if you do yours.
They're Landon, I regret to inform you, they will not do their part. They're not gonna fix anything or change. The only thing we can control is us.
Oh,
and on that note,
all right. I guess we'll listen, everyone. How about this? I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you listening to us. And if you take one thing away from this, is that together we can go through some dark times talking about some shit. But at the end of the day, I have a good time listening to you, Truman, and I hope we put together some stuff that's somewhat interesting, even if you skip over episodes like this. But maybe our other ones are fun.
Wow, yeah, no, I really love the kind of self-critique that goes on where we basically imply that our listeners have wasted their time by listening to us. But again, somewhat akin to how I felt at the end of watching The Boys in the Boat.
I know. I really wanted to focus on the appreciation part of that, and it just, it unraveled. I'm sorry.
Landon, I appreciate listening to you two, and you know what? I typed up a probably good 7 or 8 pages of notes about how bummed out I was by this movie, and I feel very seen and recognized knowing that there's at least one other person out there in the world who was also very upset and bothered by this anodyne ass, meaningless movie. The most they show it on a plane movie of all time. Folks, if you're on a plane, you can probably watch this on a plane right now.
Don't do it, though. And if you see someone else watching this on a plane, make them take a history lesson. You know what? We're so close to ending this on a positive note. I'm so sorry. I'm not going to go there.
If you see someone watching this on a plane, simply turn your head 45 degrees to the right and watch the other screen, which surely will be playing Wonka, or by the time this episode is released, probably Wicked as well.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Let's end that right there so that I don't say one more word.
Okay, well, for Landon Solano, I've been Truman Caps. And for Truman Caps, I've been Landon Solano. Okay, have a great week, everybody. Bye! Bye!
Movie Memory Machine is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/gruntworkpodcast to keep the machine running. Theme song by Porky's Groove Machine. Rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. For more information on today's show, visit MovieMemoryMachine.com.